You need to have the right environments to match strengths or just the environment or the type of things you're looking to achieve to align with the capabilities of what's there as well. You can't, I think there's probably better analogies out of it, but you can't get like elephants to climb trees and things like that. Um,
I love that one. You are and will always be your most valuable asset. Welcome to the Me Inc. podcast, a series of conversations with individuals living happy, healthy, and engaged lives, while exploring the importance of emotional intelligence to thrive in this ever-changing world. My name is Nigel Franklin, a CPA, MBA, and a certified emotional intelligence coach. My mission and passion is to enable others to be that best version of themselves by understanding the importance of making investments in their physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. Let's start the show. So for our first conversation, we have Andrew Codd. Andrew is the CEO of AVF Worldwide, the president of Phonetics. He is an award-winning podcaster of the Strength in Numbers show, which is available in more than 170 countries. He's a best-selling author and a failed Navy aviator.
that's very, very true. It's got to be some
And
failures in there along the way.
Andrew, welcome to the show.
Yeah.
Super excited to chat with you. Excited also that you were willing to mentor me on this part of my journey. For the audience, so the Me Inc. concept started from my travels in 2017 as I traveled more internationally as trying to figure out how I can be my best self and perform at my best level. So I think I had done it for about a year. And I just talked about seeing yourself as the most important entity in the world and making investments in your spiritual, mental, and physical well-being on a daily basis to kind of constant move you towards your goals. And I had the opportunity not just to present it at the AICPA conference, but shortly after to be a guest on Andrew's podcast. I credit you with breathing life into it because there was value and I appreciated talking about it so much. And the energy that we exchanged that day was so exciting that I've moved it forward. So here I am. Thank you for breathing life into that idea.
I don't know. I appreciate you saying that, Nigel. I suppose that we have to thank you for arranging this to be today, and hopefully the audience and those listening in get some value out of it. I hope they do. But what a fantastic concept, and you're right, with great energy that day. And,
Yeah.
and since we know we've kicked it around a bit, and the time's flown in between. It's crazy.
Yeah, I know, but what's interesting though, it's from that conversation and I try to live a connected life, but we've connected and helped each other in different ways over that time. So it's actually been this nice two-way
Yes, it
relationship,
has.
right?
It has been. Yeah, and I really hope, again, as I said, the audience, you get something from that today as well, because I know we have.
Yeah.
So yeah, curious to see where this goes, this conversation.
It's 6:15 a.m. in Cork, Ireland. And what's actually pretty cool was we didn't meet until now. So Tom and we flew in to have this conversation in person because I figured that would be the right way to get the energy. And thank you again for accommodating that because, again, we're in Ireland for 12 hours. So tell us, who's Andrew?
Yes. Yeah. Good question, Nigel. I would say, look, tip the audience off to the fact that we're in Cork, Ireland, and that's a rock in the Atlantic Ocean for some people who may be not familiar where it is. We have a great heritage here, and it's actually where my journey probably began because I grew up in Ireland. I've lived in a few different places and spent my career supporting companies and organizations in various parts of the world. So from a family perspective, I've 4 kids. We've got a lovely family set up here, a small holding of land, and it's great to be able to show up, do loads of really cool things around the world in the business world or like the podcasting with the writing even, and see my family grow up. And it's one of the coolest things. In the morning, I get to see them sometimes at lunch, dinner. There's a bit of travel with the work we do, but that's understandable as well. I really appreciate the times we are together. And as you said earlier, the failed Navy aviator. So during my first stint growing up here in Ireland, I did want to I was just inspired by the whole Top Gun thing. So I said, yes, that's exactly what I want to do when I grow up. I never thought I'd become an accountant instead. But before we got, but I was fairly handy.
Accounting is just as exciting, Andrew. So
There are areas, yeah. I did try sales. All my uncles were in sales, actually. And I grew up on the road with them my weekends and holidays, being out with them on the road selling different products to retailers and so on. And yeah, like I could do that, but I just was never really drawn to the sales side. I really love numbers. But seriously, my first love was I just had loads of posters of F-15 Eagles around my bedroom wall. And I know they flew Tomcats and Top Gun, but no, the F-15 was for me. And I was a great aviator on a computer.
Yeah.
But just I never really followed up that dream of mine. So you never know. You
You
never
never
know.
know.
I'm only in my 40s. You never know.
You could still get there. Professionally, then, your podcast is on finance and creating value within finance. But do you mind sharing a little bit about your career arc and some of the things that you've done? Perspective.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't regard it as it's really exciting, but I dabble with the idea of becoming an accountant because I was advised by I used to play the church organ. I remember one of the nuns telling me, asked me questions about me, and I hadn't quite explained to her about the failed Navy aviator concept. And that's what I really wanted to do. But then she said after a few questions, I said I was good at numbers and whatever. She had ever thought about becoming an accountant. I
Mhm.
didn't think that's what would have happened, but the cool thing with accounting is I love business. I love understanding how businesses work, what they do well, where they could better, how do the numbers flow. And accounting teaches you the transactions, how they flew through an organization, and also the language of business, which revolves around the numbers. And I suppose with the sales side of the things that I had growing up, I was very good then at telling stories about the numbers. And I just found myself increasingly in front of investors or senior management in these companies. So I just ended up working across loads of industries. I felt a bit like the robot from Short Circuit, Johnny Five. For some of your listeners' input, I just wanted to be exposed to loads of different businesses and learn. So I got to work across loads of different industries. And I suppose towards the end of my sort of days working as an employee, I was at Dell for a good period of time in the technology sector
Mhm.
and working with them on their services side. And I had quite a large business unit area responsibility in the many billions. And I know I've got this opportunity now to become, how do you say, hopefully develop a very well-known brand of finance software amongst the community as well. Because again, with the podcasting and the connections that have come off the back of that, you get to understand talking to other CFOs, other leaders out there as well, what their challenges are. And there is some thinking out there that there's a lot better we could be doing in finance teams, supporting our organization, supporting the decision making. And that's where I started putting some ideas on paper, getting a group of developers together, software developers, and we came up with the phonetics to complement the services we provide us at AVF Worldwide. And it's just a really cool journey. Again, being able to do this and this rock in the Atlantic Ocean and from Cork, it's and like our nearest neighbors are cows around here,
Right.
Frisian cows. So it's like there's not that many people around here.
Yeah.
It's really remote. It's just cool. It's just
Yeah.
really nuts.
So where has your career taken you? You said and I'm going to come back to how many different things, but I do believe that travel and exposure to different cultures, different people, it does shape us, right? It solidifies an approach to the world. It solidifies an appreciation and understanding of your journey. So what are some of the places that it's taken you?
Yeah. I suppose the country-wise, I suppose most of the time has been spent, I guess, in the UK, Ireland, and the US, so East Coast of the States, and then across Europe as well. We've had the pleasure of working with a number of different management teams. So I got to work with German teams based out of, was it Frankfurt for it, Paris, Dubai, Cairo. Weirdly enough, unlike yourself, Nigel, I've not been to Asia ever, even for a
Oh,
vacation.
really?
Yeah,
Ah,
no, seriously. So that's something I've not done. Although my eldest son has moved over to Perth in Australia, so I do hope to get out that way within the next year. So
yeah.
he seems to be having a great time out there.
Yeah, I think it's actually so we just flipped it all the way around. So a lot of the places that you've experienced, I've not experienced as well. So it's one of those interesting things. I'm hoping to get to those places while you're hoping
You can
to get
compare notes. It's
right.
like get the
Yeah,
inside track.
yeah. It's interesting, right? How it's almost like supplementing your experiences as you go along. But so you've grown up. I think you an entrepreneur now, right? How did you get there? Is it something that you've always been into? Because one of the things that strikes me about you and from our initial conversations, you do a lot of different things. And what I wanted to talk about is the mindset to do a lot of things. Because from an accountant's perspective, and I apologize to any accountants who are listening, think in a very structured manner. most accountants, we're used to operating in what happened, not what's happening. I think it's a very different standpoint. Accountants, again, aren't necessarily the population. The largest population of accountants are not entrepreneurs, are not people who will step out and do things. So what's the mindset, and how do you talk about that?
Yeah, it's, I would say, like, I probably would have gone down, like, when I was at university, I did actually, before I even went to university, actually, and left school, all my friends went off to university and I didn't.
Mhm.
I am stayed behind. It wasn't that I was just too cool. It was just I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I just fell back into a sales job. And so, yes, I hadn't quite embarked on being an accountant just yet. And I set up my own business. And as part of that journey, I realized I didn't have the skills to run a business. It was profitable, really profitable. And it was based out of London in England. And they were selling soft drinks and snacks into schools
Mhm.
and retailers around there. And I just, again, the way I was able to interpret the profitability, I could source the goods at lower cost, and I could be much better connected distributors and undercut them on price. But it was selling a lot of volume. It was very busy, and I just wasn't very good at delegating and stuff like that. So I didn't have the skills like you'd expect to find in a corporation, and I didn't have the understanding to run a business properly, or confidence for that matter. So then that's when I started to embark on the accounting. Was I went to college to learn those skills and then apply them on the summers in various businesses, and then started on a career path with that. So I actually did start out as an entrepreneur, and then now I know more what I'm doing, what's expected of me. But it was a very slow journey. But I guess, like, one thing maybe, Nigel, I'm never really in a rush that way, if that makes sense. I may have a sense of urgency at the time, but if I look at my career, I was never really in a rush to go back to being an entrepreneur. I
Mhm.
like the safety of a paycheck. And then, interestingly enough, when Katie, my wife, wanted to move back to Ireland, base our kids there and so on, it was like, okay, there's not really any sort of real jobs at the moment. It was around the time of the recession in '08, I think. And I said, look, I'll set up my own business again and do some consulting work. And it worked out really well. It was really lucrative. So I was able to dip back into that at the time. And then I saw, how do you say, an opportunity come up with a forerunner for Dell called EMC. And then I went to work for them. Again, it wasn't about the money because there was a massive pay cut involved with that, but it was just nice to spend time and see my kids grow up. So yes, I was having a career, but I think we've talked about this before, this idea of ecology, understanding what things you want out of on a various different scales. So it could be your from a learning perspective, or it could be from a career perspective, or family relationships, or money perspective. And then understanding how much you value each of those, and then aligning what you're doing with those. So sometimes in my career, it was that entrepreneur route. Other times it was to be a salaried employee, which
Mhm.
doesn't sound as exciting, but it just suited where we were in our lives at that time. And now I'm at a stage where, yeah, it's something I feel is the right thing to do for what myself and my family are looking outside of life and have out of life and the things they want. And yeah, it's working out really well. And that's another cool thing. It's like even down to the first sale, right? When you start out, I suppose I'd only left corporate life like 3 weeks, and
Mhm.
I'd already had the first sale in a new company, and it's just like I had no real plans per se. So it's just like it just fell in, and I think it's because you just develop the connections along the way. So it just everything just seems to fit in together for us. Or maybe
Right.
it's because we are so focused on having that ecology of putting our time into the right things and making sure we're not fighting one at the behest of another.
Yeah.
And we might have described it, say, up and down, Nigel, like in the past, like you're doing all of these things and it's a bit all over the place. But I think the common thread through a lot of it is trying to find that route back to ecology, the fit of all those activities in a way that works. And yeah, there's been sometimes I felt really burned out and low on energy. And I've been able to very well course correct because I've got a good group of people around me, good connections, acquaintances, friends, and family to keep me grounded, and people I can talk to. You
Yeah.
know, I think that's very key. I think you were the mentor, mentioned the word mentoring. Such an underrated thing. I wish I'd uncovered that sooner in my career. I come across a mentor till I was like 25. I would say someone I could call a mentor.
Mhm.
And that's where the podcast grew off actually was I was getting all these questions from people. It's like, how do you do this in finance, or how do you do that? And I realized I don't have all the answers. I
Mhm.
am the worst person to be asking because I'm still trying to figure all this stuff out.
Right.
So I said, why not just like, I'm quite happy to ask people on behalf of others, and I'm interested in learning myself.
Right.
So like, I'll just record all those conversations with people that know stuff more than I do. And then I'll put them up online for other people to access. And by the way, Nigel, I actually brought this idea to some of the main accounting institutes out there. They just weren't interested. And I just got frustrated with that and said, you've got these amazing networks of finance and
Right.
accounting professionals, more better than I have. And then so I just said, screw you guys, I'll just go do it myself.
What's interesting, though, is that back to the accountants and the way that we think and behave, it's not a very forward-thinking profession.
Probably.
That's the thing, right? So it's not, you don't have to be as innovative as you need to be. And that's one of the bigger fears that I would have, becoming entrenched in all the ideas, because then you don't actually move forward. Yeah, but what you actually just shared, and I want to make sure I'm following it because I'm excited to dig deeper into some of it. You talked about starting out from a place where you didn't know what you wanted to do, but you still made forward movement with it. You were able to fall back on the sales portion of it because that's what you had, like that's where you grew up. But as you found your way, you gained capabilities, you gained confidence, and you talked about, and I'll get back to it, you talked about running on all cylinders and getting closer to burnout sometimes, having a support system. But I think the ecology portion of it, I wanted to make sure we explored a little bit more. And one of the times we were speaking, I think you shared that as part of one of your downtimes, you have a greenhouse. Right?
Yes.
And I think you tied the idea of the greenhouse into the ecology and backed it into a way of looking at life.
I say these things and I can't even remember.
That's the exciting part about having those conversations. But the way that you actually talked about it was in that way of creating conditions that are conducive to growth.
Yeah, exactly right. There is actually a bit story about this greenhouse, or some people might call it a polytunnel. So I went to my brother-in-law and he has one, and it's like on a commercial grade. And I was like, I had no idea the work involved. So anyway, I went away and ordered it. But one of the cool things I was looking forward to wasn't quite flying a fighter jet, but was actually driving one of those mini diggers for a few days. So I just cleared my diary.
Yeah.
And I just had great fun with a mini digger during the pandemic to clear a load of earth. And it was really good fun. But how do you say? So that was the fun bit of it. Putting up this huge structure wasn't as much fun. It's like semi-commercial polytunnel. It's 40 foot by 18. So it's quite a big deal. And then once you put it in, you've got to put the raised beds in. But all the things you need to do inside it there, if you think about growing a garden, even if it wasn't like vegetables or fruits or anything like that, was you need to provide the right environment for things to be successful. And I guess when I started transitioning from being an accountant to maybe a finance leader or a business leader, then it came to me, I felt like I had to go up a level and just be able to see the full field of play and come up with a strategy and create an environment where we could, as one of my previous mentors said, goes, Andrew, you seem to have this knack creating what he called a performance execution environment. But what I think he meant by that is if you think about a greenhouse or a polytunnel and what goes inside, you basically got to make sure that you've got good groundwork in there. That one, the polytunnel is not going to blow away in a wind. And we get a lot of wind in Ireland, a lot of gales. I think we had it was 100 kilometers the other night to about 80 mile an hour, 70 mile an hour winds or whatever the other night. So we get a lot of wind. So it needs to have solid foundations, but also that it's going to have, a structure going forward, some sort of structure around it. And then inside of that, you got to look after the soil. And in polytunnels or greenhouses, you might have raised beds because they're easier to work on. So you raise it up a bit, so less stress on the back. You need to have the right mix of soil for the right conditions and make sure that it's regularly watered. If you see weeds, tend to the weeds so that you're not disturbing the growth of the plants, the fruits and the vegetables that you've got there. So it's like I didn't really have time to go in and out and so on as much. But anyway, so look, but it's also a nice way of doing downtime. It just reminds me of that analogy. It's like sometimes I feel like we're gardeners tending to our gardens. And again, it's about making sure there's good foundations. We're looking after the environment. We're planting stuff that's appropriate for the environment as well. This comes back maybe to the idea of people's strengths and weaknesses. I always wondered for years why when you do like these development programs, they tend to hone in on your weaknesses. Like we did like an assessment together, Nigel, and I've always known my empathy isn't great. Oh, it never has been. And for years, people were trying to get me to do better at that. And I actually married someone who's got amazing empathy. She could just look at you and feel you straight away. She knows exactly what you're thinking. I'm not like that. I have to ask loads of questions. And even then, I might not get it. I find it very hard to put myself in other people's shoes. But there's other strengths I do well. And that's a bit like a garden. Like you're not going to, like in Ireland, lemons can grow given the right conditions, but it's a lot of work. I've actually got a lemon tree and it's actually growing. But I had one once and it didn't grow very well because I didn't have the right environment for it. You need to have the right environment to match strengths. or adjust the environment or the type of things you're looking to achieve to align with the capabilities of what's there as well. You can't, I think there's probably better analogies out of it, but you can't get like elephants to climb trees and things like that. Um,
I love that one. You can get elephants to climb trees, and
I think you can try, but it's not going to work.
no,
It's like tree's not
but
going to be able to take it.
no, back to the idea. It's the foundation. It's watering it to grow. The weeds, weeding out the weeds, and also managing for rodents, right? Like the weeds and the rodents could be your mind, and the weeds could maybe the weeds
Distractions,
are your
even, yeah.
mind, and then the rodents can be just people who are not helping your progress or actually
Oh,
detracting away from it. But I like the idea of performance execution environment and
and
also
actually, Nigel, on that one, you just the
Mhm,
watering, right?
mhm.
Fact for you, I actually didn't realize this. You can actually overwater stuff, and it does it
Yes,
damage. You don't want to
yes,
do too much watering either. It's just like a bit like Goldilocks in the
right.
porridges. She
Yeah.
just wants it to be just right.
I like that idea, the performance execution environment or an environment for growth. And that's a mindset that I want to say that I'm going to keep running with as I talk to my teams and as I think about how we can actually be more effective. One of the things you shared that earlier in your career, you didn't have the confidence or the capability. What were some of the failures that you had in the early years? And I know you talked about the empathy part of it, and maybe just for the audience, we'll talk a little bit more about the EQI definition of empathy in a little bit. You shared it was that you were always goal oriented and you wanted to get things done and you drove hard. And I think that's from some of the conversations. But
Yeah.
what were some of those mistakes that you said that you looked at that like looking back at now, you go, you know what? Yeah, this was actually not this was an opportunity or a new plane for me to operate from. I needed to learn this so I can be better.
Yeah, I suppose maybe I hid my lack of confidence up in sense of entitlement, or maybe that was just the fact I was in my 20s anyway.
Yeah.
But
Just
yeah, so I
go into that a little bit, a sense of entitlement,
yeah,
because you see that a lot now. Teams are multi-generational. It's
maybe
one
I'm
of the
finally
things
growing up
right. So
saying that.
when you say a sense of entitlement, help a little bit with that.
I remember I was a really good employer. I really loved working there, loved the teams. Felt I was learning loads, and I'd actually qualified as an accountant. But whatever way the industry was at that time, they couldn't offer a salary rise to align with market value because once you got your letters, I think it was like probably a 25%, maybe 30% increment, which was a lot for a young family. I was about to get married as well at the time. We were looking at our first mortgage. So it was a fairly big deal to get paid a bit more. And so I actually ended up leaving the company. So I felt I was entitled to more, but obviously I hadn't made the case in the right way and so on. So I just moved company without really thinking much about what I wanted to do. And it turned out to be the worst career move of my mind. I moved for money. I hated the environment. I was working 60, 70 hours a week. It completely upset the ecology of my life. I say I was even lucky to have gotten married at that stage and start having kids. But luckily people around me to help course correct after what I think I started looking for a job after 5 or 6 months.
Mhm,
And rather than a sense of entitlement, I then looked into myself, what value could I offer? What type of position do I needed next to get me to where I wanted to? And I met this amazing mentor who showed me this framework, a way of thinking about a career that started with the end in mind, which is great advice from Stephen Covey. Start with the end in mind, get a really strong picture and get emotional about what type, which again is hard for me, but get a picture about the type of life you want to live. And he started like with a career angle, but then I've added to it over the time. I said, no, not just about your careers, like what type of relationships do you want to be having, say, in 3 years' time? Or like what type of, where do you want to be living? And like what type of role are you doing? Who are you talking with? What type of money are you making? What type of activities are you doing outside of work? And does work allow you the time to do the activities? Because you got to make it realistic. And then you got to go back to your strengths. Then is the next step. It's okay, what are your certifications and strengths in your networks and what are you doing now and you want to keep on doing, and then the gap in between is become solvable. It tells you what your next move might need to be. So then I was able to figure out what my next move was, and then all my moves since were very well thought through, purposeful, and it gives you that sort of sense of purpose. And then I just felt I was able to take things to another level. Of course I still didn't have all the right answers, but I felt like I was making progress towards something that was worthwhile.
yeah,
And I've not only been able to do that for myself, but with the podcast, and I did a bit of coaching along the way as well. That's actually helped thousands and thousands of other people in their career and non-career activities. And
mhm,
that's one of the things I definitely will look back on in older years and say, yeah, if it hadn't been for those mistakes and those maybe not making the best career choices earlier on because I was feeling entitled and so on, then I probably wouldn't have stumbled across this and been able to influence not only my own life, my family's life, but others as well, which has been, yeah, that's pretty cool.
If you're enjoying the content, I hope it's not too much to ask that you like, follow, and even share this podcast with someone who you think might find it beneficial. Let's jump right back into the show. I really like that framework. And maybe that's the accountant in me again, or the former athlete going back as framework. I think structure breeds discipline and discipline breeds performance, right?
Discipline,
over time. But it's one of the things that's striking me in the framework is it's like things break down in that framework. And it seems
true. I know, yeah. I'll give you the rosy version.
Yeah. It seems dynamic. And it's okay to start with the end in mind, but it can be a very bumpy road.
Very much, yeah. And windy. It's not. And the way we lined up the model, and maybe I could share some of the links to. So I actually took people through it on the podcast because we have a Monday memo section on a Monday, which like we just go through an idea that's emerging or whatever, or sharing a framework or something, and then we have the main interview then on the Thursday. But just on that one, the model itself is like linear. It's like a step up stairs. We take one step at a time now. So you go up the stairs in a safe and effective way, but the journey in between is definitely not linear. I think a lot of your listeners could relate to that.
Sometimes I think and it may be one of those naive things, but we do expect it to be linear. So talk to me about in that framework, what are some of the challenges that you found over time? So you've lived this experience. You've lived the framework now for 20 years. But what have you found to be those times when the system would come off track?
Yeah, right? I know. Yeah, and that's annoying because it's such a systematic mindset. It's about making a better environment or system actually, and how they interrelate. But no, the one that immediately comes to mind, because my wife Katie never lets me forget it, is on that first time implementing this way of thinking. I felt like I needed to get into a multinational type role leadership wise, and I felt that accounting was a really good qualification, but in some US multinational companies they wouldn't recognize the qualification I have. It's like they'd think you're like a bookkeeper. So I had to go and get like an MBA from a good university. So that was one of the things I had to achieve on it. And the reason why my wife would never let me forgive it, because we had a young kid at the time. I just was so on purpose from a career perspective that I just had my sight set on, I'm going to achieve this. And I when I got my MBA with a distinction, I put so much effort. So I think I got an A in every single module except for one, which was marketing. I got a B minus, but everything else was an A. I tend to be very disciplined. I prefer that, similar to yourself. I'm probably not to the same level or standard as yourself, Nigel, but I was a semi-professional athlete in a sport called rugby. Played it to a very high standard. Got injured, and then, but again, that was at the time I didn't have a lot of direction. But if I set my mind to something, I would have achieved it. And it was the same with this framework. I'd have this plan, and nothing was going to stop me getting there. And no, I achieved everything on it, which is really cool. But it was very career orientated, and that's where it became unstuck. Was the stuff going on outside? I was neglecting my family, my young family at the time. It started off really well at the beginning, so that's why I've adapted the framework over time to include this idea of ecology and having, how do you say, non-career perspectives in there as well, coming back to these other areas of values, the things we value in life. So our own growth, our own learning, our relationships, the money or hobby side of the equation. Like you don't really say live to work, you work to live. So I like to turn that around that way. And so yes, I've adapted the framework over time based on the hard lessons I had. But yeah, Katie never forgets, and she had a really hard time because I was busy away either working, networking, learning with the MBA, driving towards that, and she was left bringing up these kids pretty much on her own as a single mother. We probably lost a couple of years of our life together on that one, and thankfully she had the patience to stay with me on it. She probably knew that I probably would have achieved a few of the things like the money side and the career side, and there's benefits, fringe benefits with that. But,
I don't think she would like hearing that, Andrew. But
no, I don't know. Like she's got good taste.
I'm gonna say the ladies all think about athletes, and here Katie is thinking about the accountant, right? So just give her give her those flowers. But it's interesting though. I when I say I don't like, it's not celebrating it, but I like the fact that you said you lost years of your life together.
Yeah, yeah.
And is that concept of, and I know we chatted about it before, but is that concept of being professional at certain things in your life and then amateur at other things,
Oh
right?
yeah,
So
definitely.
it's like you give all
Worse
your
than
effort,
amateur.
right? It's like you give all your effort to your job, but then
Yep.
you come home and it's something that's totally different. And I joke about it. I think it was in the book by Marshall Goldsmith, Triggers. And it was that idea, again, professional at work and being amateur at home,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So we give patience at work, we give effort at work, and then we come home and we're like, you know what, I'm tired, so I'm not going to give it. But you're the first person like who've talked about it, who shared it as I lost years of life together with my kids
Yeah.
and my wife by just focusing singularly on me. And now
Yeah.
there are sacrifices to make, but I don't think all the time that we can find it doesn't always have to be on the fringes. It doesn't always have to be one or zero. There's some in between, right? As life's not binary. I joke about it. I have friends who have one switch in life. It's just either on or off. But there is some part of it in between. But what you've learned on that one, right? Because that's the family part, but you still have to manage you throughout that process. And I like when you
Yeah.
tied it into hobbies. What are some of those things? What are some of those lessons you learned about you and caring for you?
Yeah, that's a very
Um,
good point, actually. Yeah, because actually, and it was actually just as you were talking there, Nigel, like an image came into my head of cars and gears and stuff. And you see friends be on and off switches there. It's like I was thinking, yeah, like probably the better thing is gears, and maybe that's the way I approach this. Actually, is there are different segments that we can value. So obviously, hobbies in ourselves is one. For me, it didn't even. So I was so focused on the career, I wasn't even that focused on my own personal state, whether it be spiritual, mental, or physical. So that really went by the wayside as well. They do say when you get married, you do tend to put on a few pounds. And so I put on a lot, actually. So I have to say I'm a bit probably in better shape now, mentally and physically. I'm amazed I didn't burn out even then or have a crisis or anything. But I suppose coming back to maybe the car as well, actually, I'm very lucky at having good people around me, and there was some people seeing where it was going, and they started bringing some awareness to it, and that was really helpful. I even look at what we do in finance and accounting as a bit like a car analogy. So, look, I'd ask you, Nigel, in your audience, if you were driving your car, right, along, say, the freeway or the highway. How fast would you drive it if you didn't have a brake pedal? Like, how fast would you go? Would you go at a snail's pace, or would you go hell for leather, 100 mile an hour?
Yes, that's an interesting one, right? You will actually probably go. It depends on the person, right? Because there are some people who don't care about crashing.
There are nutcases out there, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I know a
So,
few actually
right?
would see how fast they could try it. But no, the point is you need a brake pedal on a car because the brake pedal is actually the thing that allows you to go faster with confidence, right? I think that's the same with these frameworks is you need to have people around you that act as that brake pedal that can help you have the confidence go faster, that they've got your back. If they see something going out of kilter, they'll talk to you about it or bring it to your attention. They're not going to hide. And I suppose, look, we were fairly young in our relationship at that time. Katie was one of them, my wife, who was calling it out. But I had other people as well, that friends have been around for a while. And then I started appreciating the value of mentors more, and I had other people calling it out as well. And as I keep saying, my empathy wouldn't be very strong, so I couldn't see it in myself. And that's why you need a network of people around you, inside and outside of work as well, because you're still one whole person. And I think, I suppose, in later years, I've probably spent a bit more time now going back to church a bit more. I'm not like a regular goer or anything, but I find it very a good place to gather thoughts and just listen to just perspectives like for our guides. And again, whatever your faith is your faith, but I've just found that something that's worked for me. And actually, on the statistical side, I saw this study because I've got most of my kids now, sort of teenagers, or the eldest is in his 20s, and it's the read something that actually a good indicator of a teenager's happiness is actually whether they still go to church or service. So there is actually that benefit as well, dragging the kids along. It's apparently for their well-being too, not
It's
just mine. It's a
I,
family activity.
yeah, it's one of those things that it's the little things that make you feel good about yourself, right? Good about your journey, good about where you're at that period of time. I want to make sure though that I do believe in that same evolution of the me in concept. I think that it definitely there's the body, mind, and spirit. And one of the things that I've grown to appreciate, having a partner who's there to go along for that ride with you
Oh yeah.
as a support system is also something that's very helpful to put in the brake pedal on, rejuvenating and getting going in one way, shape, form, or another. I'm going to go into like you touched on a parallel about gaining the weight. So I gained about, from my athletic days to the time, maybe around the time that I was married, I gained probably about 30 pounds. And
I can't imagine you
but,
lost.
but,
No,
but
no,
you
no.
you would you would laugh about this pivotal watershed moment in life, right? So my ex-wife and I, we dated, and I'm tying it back to you, but I was smiling when you said it because I lived that experience. And we dated off and on since college. So she knew me when I was in tip-top shape in my life. And then I think it was in the peak of the financial crisis. We were just married in our first year. And why I'm on this journey again, and why I started, was we didn't speak before going to work in the morning, but I'm
Oh,
getting dressed in the dark one morning, and I got from her, like, I just heard, "Aren't we just bursting out of our clothes?"
Jesus. Oh, lovely. Not the most romantic thing
Yeah,
to
yeah,
hear
no,
ever,
but
right?
it wasn't romantic. But
Exactly.
it took me about 2 days, and I was
It's
working a lot at the
amazing.
time, and I came back and I bought the P90X videos back then, right? 2 days later, about 2 a.m. in the morning, because it really stuck with me. But what came after was the best year. I started this in October, and it was the best season, the best busy season I had at KPMG. I worked
Wow.
out, I was in shape. We actually, I
How-
accomplished so much more, and my team accomplished so much more in that time.
That's quite a demanding environment, but how
Right.
did you find the time for that?
No, but that's the thing, right? We make time for the things that we find are important. And I was saying that's just the physical aspect of it. There are other things that I was doing.
Yes.
It was 30 minutes a day, sometimes an hour a day, and I found the time to do that. Right. And
Yeah.
it introduced me to so many different things, that those harsh words, right? Because that's how I found yoga. That's how I found working out again. It was like that pivotal part of life for me. So you gained weight, and what was that turning point for you that you would say, this, this is not the path, I should be on a different path? Because I like that from a behavioral change perspective.
It's a really,
What
yeah.
changed for you?
That's, yeah, on the physical side, that's a really, and you know what? I can't really put my finger on it. Actually, no, I do. I know what it was, actually. To come back to it, I had this really crazy notion I'd go back and try and play some rugby again. That's what was it? Yeah. So like, rugby's a bit of a social scene. I think we were living in England at the time. There's a bit of a social scene with it, and I was doing a bit of coaching, and some of the coaches said you should go back playing again. It looks like you could. I used to, again, be fairly athletic,
I
but
like
there's a
that.
lot
I'm
of training
fairly.
involved with maintaining that physique. I was like, probably, I'm just under 6 foot tall, and I probably, again, this would be quite big at the time because rugby had just gone professional at the time when I was younger, and so I was probably about 220 pounds, and I didn't have a pick of fat on me. And I wouldn't have been an American footballer, but that would have been a big size for a rugby player. So that's what I was constantly comparing myself back to, which was completely unattainable because that takes a lot of effort to stay in that shape
All
and
right.
maintain that muscle mass. And but when you're that shape and you can do things, and like I always had, people said, a great set of lungs on me, so I just keep going. That was because my I used to do a lot of athletics as a kid, and I had a really good set of lungs on me, which was again a great benefit for lasting a whole game and maintaining peak performance. And then, but you have this position in rugby called the prop, which is basically you're the fat guy and you're just there to add weight to the scrums. It's a bit like offensive linemen in
Yeah,
American
yeah.
football, right?
Okay.
And so I'd gone from maybe say a wide receiver or running back to an offensive lineman essentially. And yeah, so you're pretty much good for nothing except for adding weight in certain
Yeah.
situations. And then I think that was enough for me, as I need to start getting back into shape here. Because yeah, so anyway, I did, and I just set on the journey. So I just started lifting weights again, which was a great way of burning fat. And then I just started a bit of running again. And then yeah, like even now, and it's amazing when you feel like you've got a load off of your body, you can move a lot more, you got a lot more flexibility, you can do a lot more with a young family as well. It was great being able to do stuff with them, partake in activities, and not say no, I need to stand back or anything like that. So I felt being physically fit, I was able to enjoy life more and probably had better endurance during tougher periods of work as well. And the amazing thing is, even now to this day, I probably would train maybe 5 or 6 days a week, not for any specific outcome per se, but it's probably half an hour a day. And during the summer, I do it first thing in the morning. And during the winter, I start work early, but then I find an hour or two during the day to fit that maybe before lunch.
Yeah.
And so always find time for it. Whereas before, I certainly neglected it.
Yeah, I think the clarity of mind and the confidence that comes with working out, right? It's not the body creates its own energy.
I believe so. Yeah, it's a good
Yeah,
point.
it's so important that if you are looking at your career as a journey, that you make sure that your body, which is the vehicle that's going to carry us through life, is actually in tip-top shape. Going back to the car analogy, it's interesting how I think sometimes we neglect the fact that where we are from an energy perspective is a combination of our diet, sleep, and exercise. Getting to you now, what lights you up, or the mindset that you carry to keep you from, you're doing all the things, you have the structure in place, you're dynamically thinking about where you are and where you're going. But what's the mindset, and what's the mindset when you're meeting obstacles?
All right. Yeah. So, yes, an obstacle. Actually, I suppose the mindset with most things nowadays is I suppose, look, as a parent, it's I'm just constantly mindful that I want to be a good example to my kids. So as much as I may lack empathy a lot, I probably that's the one thing I work really hard on is just trying to say, look, how would they perceive me, or how would I want them to perceive me in terms of tackling things that face up. And it's even actually the same with the client who's working at recently. There was an obstacle came up. I think we were discussing about like forecast accuracy was a challenge, and again for me it was just like, how do I want to be perceived in this in terms of, and I there are certain strengths in around areas like optimism, and I have this belief that everything could be solved, because that comes back to principles we've discussed in the past actually, Nigel, is you can pretty much, if you accept that measurement is just the method of reducing uncertainty. It doesn't have to be perfect, 100% complete or accurate, but it's just measurement in itself as a task is a way of reducing uncertainty. Then you can measure anything, and then you can solve towards that and develop progress towards that. And it's the same with forecast accuracy, actually. I always believe that you can solve, not only can you solve everything, you can measure everything. Everything is to some degree measurable, and uncertainty can be reduced. Now, it's not eliminated entirely, but things can be, how do you say, obstacles can be overcome, if not at least a bit imperfectly. By the way, I don't know the answer to get around it. That's my point.
Uh-huh.
I pull in people to help me understand how to get around it. And that's a cool thing about being a leader I didn't appreciate when I was younger, is I don't need to know all the answers. And it's really forced me to rely on smart people, be and not try and be the smartest person in the room like I used to when I started out.
Yeah,
You
that
know,
that whole idea that if you're the smartest person in the room, you should change rooms. It actually it's
It's
actually
actually, but it's a really good one actually, because
yeah.
that's what should have happened sooner in my career.
Yeah.
And even outside of my career as well, I didn't think I was the best example I could be for my kids.
Yeah.
And I hope as they remember more as they get older, that they can pull on the more positive experiences as part of my development and their development.
Yeah. What are the proudest moments that you have outside of the family and the regular finance workshop? And maybe this is maybe getting
All
to
right.
what's in the podcast and why, and the fact that it's still not monetized or anything else, but
Yeah, that was
you've
another thing.
had.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. That is actually a proud thing, being able to make it. How do you say? Because I suppose, look, it's not monetized, but the way been able to cover the cost of the podcasting was I wrote a book before that, and it I just somehow became a bestseller. It just seemed to spark people's imagination, and that funds essentially the podcast, because did write a second book, and I probably should say we wrote a second book, because it was basically the first 200 episodes. We just wrote up a lot of the notes from them because it's full of great advice, and I was expecting that one to be an amazing book, because actually the first book was more my thoughts, and then the second one was like all these really interesting people's thoughts, and it was
Mhm.
like, how the heck did that not sell as well as the first one? Probably comes back to my lack of marketing capability, that maybe I didn't give it a very good title, I mean, I thought we promoted it really well, but yeah, so no, that was nice moments, I would say, but that's what keeps the podcast going. But I think the like, if you'd ask me proudest moments, it probably would actually be becoming a dad and having a family, right? So if we put that to one side, outside of that, I think it's just have been able to connect with so many people in finance and understand their journeys, and learn from them, their challenges and how they're overcoming them, not just from interviewing people on the show that we save down this recording so other people can listen into, and I've been listening to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of times, but is really just making those connections and learning from the people outside as well that don't have them recorded, the people that write in or just want to have a chat, and maybe being able to help point them in the right direction. And the cool thing with having all the podcasts there is I can point them to various episodes that we record and saying, go and listen to this person because I think they had a similar challenge and this is how they overcame. So I'm not relying under any pressure at all to pull on my own. I think it's that sort of service to the finance community. I've felt like I've been able to give back, but I've got so much back in return in terms of that good feeling that I feel like I've made a difference there. And not made any money out of it, but made some great connections. And maybe I'd say not made any money out of it. Actually, indirectly, I probably have, because that's how I guess where the clients for the new company and the connections and the potentials coming from is people really want us to see be successful with our new venture. So actually, maybe there is probably a lot of monetary value in it as well, but it's just been deferred somehow. But yeah, I'm very proud of the community service on that one and giving back to the community.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome, right? You don't necessarily always hear it. And I think someone asked, why the podcast idea, this Me Inc. podcast. And it's that I've met so many cool people as I've traveled the world, and people who have inspired me and helped me in so many different ways that helps with a different perspective, that I can say, okay, how do I look at this, or how do I deal with that? Or even just in our conversation, I've never thought of measurement to reduce uncertainty, but there's always something that you can actually pull and gain from just conversations with people. And I think that's why I'm here. So the last part of one of the last things we'd want to go into is you were one of the people who were cool enough to do an EQI assessment. And
I know me and cool should never go in the same sentence.
I don't think, come on. I don't know if you want to call it brave, right? But not a lot of people.
Willing to give it a go.
I appreciate it.
And I know you do. Exactly. No, and I enjoy doing it together. I was just curious to see where it went.
Yeah, and that's what happens a lot of times. I think individuals, how do I say it? You have that curiosity for information, for self-awareness that will move you forward. And I think that's what was actually amazing about it. So actually you were able to do it or go through an assessment. We talked about your report. What were some of the things that you learned?
I suppose, look, probably a lot of your listeners have done assessments over the time, and it just gives them some indicators. Doesn't necessarily define who you are. It just says, look, that based on how you've answered these questions, this is how we think you rate in these certain areas. And for me, it probably confirmed a lot of what I felt I'd been developing towards. Showed certain strengths in certain areas, particularly around independence and I suppose problem solving. And if I remember, I keep coming back to empathy. Look, it just suggests to me that there's probably some credibility in the report, because the fact that it scored me lowest on the area that I know I am, and wouldn't try and hide it. I probably made that point very clear. But I think, okay, so it's just one step's doing the assessment. The second piece, which I think is probably more important than the assessment itself, is what are you going to do with it? Because there was some really wise person said information is not used as knowledge, but when you apply knowledge, that becomes wisdom. Get wise and put it into practice. And that's the bit I enjoyed probably and got most value out of it. Nigel was like, okay, let's use this as an example of self-awareness, taking a stake in the ground where you are now. What are you going to do with that information? So it was just a nice little bit of an action plan. Again, those SMART objectives. I'm very much goal orientated that way. And again, breaking it down, figure out what matters to you, and then measure what matters, because what gets measured gets managed. That's our tagline from our software. So that's how we did. And so I like that piece because it resonated very much with me. So it wasn't the finding the things, but it was taking those findings and doing something with them.
I really like that. From just as a reminder, and from the report, like one of the coolest things about you is that you have that positive mental attitude. So that internal self-talk that you'd have, it's positive. So let's say you'll get a problem and you're like, I can solve it because I have this experience, I have the confidence, I have the capabilities to do it, right? Which moves you forward. But I think what empathy, and when you say empathy, is the very, very pedestrian way of saying it, is that I need to feel what other people are feeling. And I think in your situation, and although you said you're not empathetic, is that you operate in the numbers. It's what's in front of you. And I think so when you say you didn't have empathy, you're like, I understand what you're saying, but this is what the numbers are showing me. So it's not that it's detached, right? It's not that it's this horrible thing. It's usually, yeah, I get it. But there's still this other thing that we need to deal with that's actually in front of us.
Yeah, so, you give a coping mechanisms. Right. Say back to people. It's, you know what I mean? Really cool tip for your audience. This is one Katie shared with me. And it's really good if you're like in relationships as well. If you feel like you're on the verge of an argument, just say to someone, you're probably right. And they go away feeling validated. But again, I have zero empathy. So I've not felt a person's feeling, but I've sensed that there could be an argument. Just say, you're probably right.
Yeah.
And then it's like, ah, okay, like I've been acknowledged.
Yeah.
It's like we'll just go away, and it just completely diffuses the whole thing. You're not
Right.
saying someone's right. You're just saying they're
Mhm.
probably right. They could
Mhm.
probably be wrong. It's the
Mhm.
same flip of a coin, but it's just how it gets interpreted the other end. So I'm really bad now because I've been given too many of these disarming mechanisms. So I'm like even disingenuous now. It's just, but seriously, I'm hopelessly at empathy. I have people who are much better than me. I've got a daughter and a wife who are just amazing. Just they
Yeah.
could just, like I said, they'll get exactly sense you when you're walking in, can deconstruct and tell you exactly how you're feeling just by
Mhm.
looking at you. That good at it. Me, no, I'm useless. So I've these coping mechanisms.
Yeah, I like that though. But again, I think it's one of those things where there are strengths and there are weaknesses parts of it, right? There are things that will move you closer to, and there are things that it would actually get you further away from. But at least in this perspective, also, I think one of the coolest things just to remind you of is the optimism that you showed. The fact that, again, the experiences that you have informs an outlook on life of, no, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to figure it out. So I think that is actually super helpful as well. But no, I appreciate you taking the assessment. Also, the idea that turning knowledge or awareness into wisdom through practice is something that I'm actually going to pull with me as well now.
Oh, we're doing that to each other, aren't we?
I take it. I appreciate that. But as we stand up now, as we try to land it, amazing conversation. But I wanted to talk about what lights you up now. One, what excites you now, and then two, is there a through line in life that's feeding that motivation?
Yeah. Look, I'm a curious animal. I think you mentioned that word a minute ago, and I'll go with it. I love learning stuff and I love applying. Maybe we need a whole conversation on this, but I've recently found my way into renewables and self-sustainability and stuff like that. So I loving outside of the work and the family, just doing that because I see my role as a bit of a provider as well. So if I can tie things in together, a common thread to in effect, I think you get the biggest bang for your buck on all your sort of the things you value. So again, if I can tie in doing things that help my family, provide some sort of financial return as well, spend time with my family, doing something that interests me, that a little bit aligned with a hobby. And like with the renewables energy, try not to electrocute myself as I'm playing around with all of these dangerous things. Danger is a good thing as well, actually. A bit of danger adds a bit of the adrenaline. That's like I find like a good way of how do you say, combining stuff and finding the interest, and it gives you the energy. So I think the fact that I've got this role as a provider, but I've also got this curiosity as well, I like that. I think that gives me really good purpose. So it's purposeful action we take. And then there was a cool theme thinking about it. A cool thing I could say is I picked it up when I was doing a bit of sales training again when I was starting out was, and I use this again to overcome challenges as well. I was just thinking about it, is understanding what we do well. A lot of people skip that part. They're always trying to figure out what we can do better and optimize. What do we do? Never lose sight of that, because that is how you do those well things. It really is a really good way of defining the value you're contributing now. Never lose it. You can always fall back on this. You've always got something to fall back on. But then that better piece and helping people come together to do stuff better, I think that's been over the later years, I've got much better at that. And I suppose that be the theme is I love helping people understand what it is they do well and where there's opportunities to do better and figuring out ways on how we can do things better. And that gives me a great kick.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because just so you know, I think you live those principles in that every time that I've reached out to you, you've been an amazing resource, always learn something, and your energy always comes through how you living life and how you approaching it. I appreciate also the balance that you have in that you do speak to combine work-life effectiveness, if you so your family, your hobbies, the job that you're doing. There's a passion line that intertwines or all those things. Andrew, man, I so appreciate you taking the time to sit with me this morning and being flexible enough so that Tom said, "Hey, we can actually do this. Let's fly to Ireland." So this was something that we planned to do over the phone, over Zoom. And I thought that it would be the best thing possible to just do it in person. Thank you. I appreciate you. And I will actually, in the show notes, we'll have ways for individuals to connect with you. So, Andrew, thank you so much. Thanks a million. I appreciate you and who you are and what you're trying to do.
And likewise, feelings completely mutual. So yeah, I look forward to more of our conversations over the years.
To wrap up this first episode of the Me Inc. podcast, I think the one theme that really resonated with me is the idea that there's a cost for everything that we do. So the analogy that Andrew made about him being solely focused on his career progression at the expense or the cost of losing years of time with his family and his wife. And that's probably the first time I've heard a professional articulated in that way, and it's really stayed with me. And also the idea of the brake pedal, and to go fast with confidence, you need to have people around to support you and to have truth tellers there in your life. I think those are the things that stuck with me from this episode. Thank you so much for joining. And I look forward to sharing the next episode with you in about 2 weeks. Again, appreciate your support and look forward to future interactions with you. Please comment. Let me know what you think, your thoughts on the actualizations you have from listening to this show today. Take good care, and until the next time.